Right now, nothing, but I suppose open up Rhino. We'll be using that in a little bit. So, I have to apologize for last week. I was out all week long, so I'm sure you guys missed me terribly.
That's okay, we were swamped with work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it was a good week to miss since you guys had finals. I really did want you to have your diagrams. Well, originally I wanted you guys to have your diagrams prepared for your presentation, and then I found out that you had a prescribed presentation for those of you who are in Iggy's review, so that wouldn't have helped you anyway. So it's okay.
We tried.
Yeah, and this week we have Thursday off, if you didn't know. Cesar Chavez Day.
Yeah, we'll get drunk.
That's the spirit.
Yep.
So what we need to do now, we basically have 1 day of class for 2 weeks worth of time. Sorry. But the good thing is we didn't have a terribly large amount of work to do specifically in class. So at least my job isn't impacted as much.
Thank God.
You guys will have some homework though. It's not a lot, don't worry. What we need to do is kind of close the book on the diagramming exercise that we did from, well, I guess now 2 weeks ago. And it's pretty simple at this point. We'll discuss that in just a second, but the other thing that we're going to do is just sort of a final exercise that relates specifically to our diagramming exercise. And it's a little more on the Rhino modeling side of things. It's not quite as diagrammy. Yeah, but you'll see when I get to actually discussing it. So what I want to discuss with you real fast is, let's go back to was it this one? I think it was this one. So our sorry guys, I'm going to be clearing my throat a lot. I'm still kind of recovering, so I'm going to try to be short and speak a little bit today. What we have to do is finish up the diagramming exercise. Oh, come on. That is not it. That is not it. Okay. Well, I don't know what happened to my work. Maybe I lost it, but hold on.
Are you changing it?
Okay, so for the assignment, guys, we got up to this point. And what I left you with was adding the win rows. So your task, or at least your homework assignment, if we were to have had class last week, was to get the win rows on your sheet and to get it to communicate to the drawing through some kind of diagrammatic means. What most of us wound up doing was some kind of like a dashed line that delineates the relationship combined with a little bit of a like a overlay or underlay, similar to what we did with the white boxes in the diagrams below. I don't want to speak exhaustively about this. What I do want to do is really just ask that you submit an attempt I want you to submit an attempt at completing that relationship, okay? Some of us, I know because I spoke to you last week about it, some of us actually are kind of close to what I'm talking about, and that's fine. We'll use those as an example to communicate what the result should be at this stage. This stage really is step 2 in a 3-step process, and the third step can be incredibly simple if we choose it to be. So the way I described it last week to those of you who I did see very briefly is that step 2 was correlate the winter and summer months to our diagram that we have in the center, right, or raw data. Step 3 is going to be to draw a diagram that relates to our design or communicates specifically how our design relates back to this analysis. So step 1, I forget how I described it, was just raw data. Step 2 is your conclusion about that raw data. So for instance, these are the hours that we're going to have to allow sunlight in during the winter months in order to use passive heating strategies. In the windrows, our conclusion could be one of a number of things, but most of us are coming to the conclusion of we have this little pie slice, that's our range or direction, that's our range of directions that we want to allow wind to enter into our building so that it can filter through and passively cool. Oh man, this is going to be tough today. Sorry guys. Yeah. So that's step 2. And then step 3, sorry, I think that was step. I'm getting confused. I'm getting turned around. I forgot all my diagrams that I drew up last week. Step 2 is come up with a conclusion. That's right, it was step 2. Step 3 is to diagram what the design strategy is in order to accomplish it. So if we have our windrows, and I don't think I exported it, but let me just draw a circle that represents it. Wait. Huh? That might be all right. Yeah, thanks if you don't mind volunteering it. Yeah, please do. I'm going to pause the video until we get it up. Okay. No more Batman versus Superman. So we have a couple of examples here of where we're trying to get to, essentially. In Yi Ying's example, we have basically the pie slice that I was telling you about, and it has a graphic connection to the range of time that it's supposed to relate to. We can also do a correlative graphic underlay that denotes the relationship. So while we used to have dashed lines over here on the summer months, we then decided instead of the dashed lines, we'll correlate it just with a gray underlay. And then over here on this side, we can do the same thing. Gray underlay here to gray underlay there. In both of these, one of the things that we could probably tweak is just how these things are reading a little bit. So the dotted line, you know, maybe we don't have to bring it all the way around to the pie slice or something like that. But when we pin up for reviews, or, you know, potentially maybe this actually reaches up and engages it or something like that, like, you need to just do it, and then we'll review it, and we'll find ways to make it read better, okay? So it's really tough to just sit here and list off, you know, 100 different ways of approaching a situation graphically and then have you remember it, you know? So we'll try to do it in a sort of situational occurrence kind of way. So these are just 2 examples of coming to a conclusion. That's step 2. Step 3 would be, and I used Yi Ying's example a lot, step 3 would be to actually analyze this diagram and come up with a design strategy, and then diagram or communicate what your design strategy is. So one example of the design strategy was to use a high mass wall that allows, or it doesn't even have to be high mass, but let's go with a simpler version first. So basically a louver system. The louver system would be there to allow some of the moderate winds in, but then also block off some of the overwhelmingly high-speed winds. So that would be direct west. Maybe we don't want direct west wind, but we want the ones around it. So our diagram then would be a series of lines. I'll make them rather thick so that they really read. Our diagram can basically just be a connection to that information. Let's see, am I on a locked layer? That's what it is. Okay. So we can connect it this way, and we'll kind of align it. Well, oh, you know what? Let me get a guide in there. Okay. So you basically just connect the information that you're looking for where you want to block it, where you want to allow it. Something like this. And so this is essentially going to be your diagram. It's a louver system that can be blocked off. That's basically it. You might not even need these, to be honest. It could just be something like that. A little too thick, we'll go with that. Okay, so that's an example of a very, very simple line diagram. Remember, we're trying to keep it to lines and points, lines, and planes. So, and that's not super clean yet, guys. Bear in mind that it should be very clean and very well aligned. I'm just doing this real fast. Another way to do it is, you can draw, a different type of design strategy in a very similar way. So for me, real quick, let's make it a little thinner here. And this one's going to be a high mass wall. So my high mass wall is going to start off like that, and then it will block the high speed winds in the middle, and then allow, we'll go here, and then allow a few more moderate winds down here. So we can go something like this. Actually, let me spread it out more. Line work going down the side, just to clean it up, make it look like a solid object. Actually, that won't work, because I want that dashed, probably. Maybe I'll dash that in at some point. But what's more important is communicating the relationship to the diagram, okay? So rather than actually leaving this as is, as an abstract object that kind of just sits off to the left-hand side of the diagram, what I can do is change the type of information I'm communicating in a slight way. So I'll go to like a 1 point. Now I'll leave it at 3 point actually. 3 point, and I'm going to make this one red. And a dashed line. And I'll basically just start off by connecting the information directly to the center point of the diagram itself. So this is my action line, and the action line is communicating essentially what I'm trying to physically do in the model. So very simply put, this is an example, and right now it's not super eloquent, right? But it's a stab at it, right? We're trying it on, seeing how it reads. Then we take a couple of steps back and we look at it and we say, does it really communicate what I'm trying to communicate? Does it communicate that I'm trying to allow wind in certain places and not allow wind in other places? And then ask your buddy next to you and say, hey, if you can't figure out whether or not it communicates, ask that person, say, hey, what do you think? Does this communicate what I'm trying to speak? Or just simply ask them, what do you think this communicates? That's even better. Okay? So this will be due Monday. Not Monday, Tuesday of next week, since we don't have class on Thursday. And I don't want to say don't do this diagram, but don't do this diagram. Okay? Make it your own diagram. Come to your own conclusion. And more importantly, I'm going to want to see this in your design at some point. So right now, because your design review is kind of done, once we get more synced up with what's happening over there, if we get more synced up with what's happening over there in the design side, I'm actually going to want to see your model, and I'm going to want to see this strategy make its way into your design.
Nice. So we're doing right now. We just started Palm Springs.
Cool. Yeah, so we'll have to change our analysis then if it's Palm Springs, and you'll have to redo all these diagrams for it.
Wes has a file too.
Yeah.
I got the EPW.
Yeah, the Palm Springs?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. You can drop it in the class folder if you want. Okay, so I'm going to stop this video. We're going to move on to the next part of the assignment, which is essentially kind of spicing up these diagrams and seeing what we can do in the future.